So hello everyone, today in the UATV studio Mr. Edward Lucas is the guest. Greetings. Yes, thank you for coming. And to start with, let's discuss what is really going on with the US policy towards Russia right now, particularly during Trump's second presidency, and the impact on European and NATO security after this inauguration and the new policy shift.
I think it's important to stay away from the details of the tantrums and micro dramas of who said what to whom in the Oval Office and who's signed what piece of paper about some mythical minerals deal. The big picture is what matters, and it is clear to me that President Trump wants to be friends with Putin's Kremlin, and he's willing to do that at the expense of European security. And that is a complete game changer. That is something we have not seen since the foundation of the Atlantic Alliance back in the Second World War, and it poses enormous questions for Europe. It imposes enormous costs on us, and particularly, I'm afraid, on Ukraine. In the long run, it poses costs on America as well, but I'm afraid that by the time the Americans realize what they have done, a great deal of damage will have already been done. Yes, I think that the Trump administration is composed of many different strands of thought and factions, and there are some people who just say, like Rick in the movie Casablanca, the problems of the world are not my department, and we want to focus solely on fixing America. And that's one strand. There's another strand, which one might call the neo-Kissinger strand, which says we face an existential struggle with China, and China is the only thing that matters. And if we have to make big sacrifices in Europe or get out of Africa, or even abandon American involvement in the Middle East, that's fine, because we just have to husband. We need every piece of artillery, every satellite, every brain, every atom focused on the threat from China. And I fear that that provides an excuse for giving Russia a free hand, either in Eastern Europe or in all of Europe. But the cake is not quite baked yet, and it's possible we will see rapid turnarounds. And it may be that some of our worst fears aren't realized, but the trust is gone. We cannot trust America, having done this appalling series of missteps once. We will not be able to rely on America for many years to come.
Yes, I usually remember the movie Darkest Hour about Churchill and the phrase that darkest time is usually before dawn. And what is happening right now? We are seeing Europe being unified, even after UK Brexit. So United Kingdom left the European Union. But in fact, in the defense sector, in some common senses and values, they are still part of the same side, the same alliance. We've heard that President Macron and Keir Starmer can go to Washington together with Volodymyr Zelensky right now. And this leads to another question. What is Europe's stance on negotiations with Russia, and how the Americans, they influence these discussions now? Because we have Ukrainian position, only reliable peace, and peace on some maybe consensus, not on Russian terms. We have American model right now, peace at any cost, peace right now in Europe, because they want obviously to shift the attention to the Pacific, probably. That is my guess. And what is Europe's take on these negotiations? What is their interest?
Well, Europe's first interest is survival. And this is not just a question of closing the defense gap with America making an orderly, polite withdrawal from Europe. That would be bad enough. We now face the possibility that Europe is actually dealing with two adversaries, one in Moscow and one in Washington. And we don't know if our advanced American weapons will work. If we are countries that have the F-35 warplane or the JASSM missile, these are heavily software dependent. Suppose we face a fight with Russia in the Baltic area or in the Arctic or wherever. And the United States says we do not want these weapons, these American-made weapons, used in some border skirmish with Russia. So we've got some very difficult times ahead of us. I think we're going to have 5 to 10 years of great risks and great costs, and with the prospect of success at the end, but plenty can go wrong in the meantime. And the most important thing for Europe at the moment is not so much getting weapons production going, though we need to do that, and I'm personally working on that right now with my new plan for a defence bank. The most important thing is political will, because if the Kremlin, and for that matter, if the White House look at Europe and they see a united, cohesive, decisive team who are willing to accept risk and make sacrifices in order to achieve goals, then Europe is much more secure, because Europe potentially is very strong. 500 million people, 17 trillion GDP. Europe could be a very strong force in regional and world politics, with a decisive say in what happens. But if Europe remains fragmented, then bigger countries will just push the European countries around, and then we face a very bleak future indeed.
So you're telling me that not the production dependence, but actually the technology production is the real case here. I've remembered some cases when licenses of Switzerland were banned for Ukraine, for Gepard air defense complexes as well, because they were produced jointly with Switzerland, and for a long time Germany couldn't have supplied that to Ukraine. And with American weapons, is it possible that they say, no, we ban you from using our weapons that you have bought from us, that you have waited for 10, 15 years to deliver, and which is really essential, maybe in the fight with Russia. And then in one moment they say, no, you can't use those weapons because we will not trade with you, for example.
Well, and that's exactly what I said. And I mean, in retrospect, the French decision to go for a tightly integrated, vertically integrated supply chain, which seemed very eccentric at the time, now looks very, very prescient and wise. And we will be going through all our weapon systems, working out, is there an opportunity for American sabotage, just as previously we had gone through looking for an opportunity of Chinese sabotage. And so this means we're not starting from scratch in Europe, we're starting from minus scratch. And we have to think very hard about what we have that will actually work and how we can stick that together into some kind of deterrent. Now, it's not just the weapons, they are very important. We have the financial deterrent, because we can seize the 300 billion. We've already seized, we've frozen the 300 billion in Russian assets. We could, I mean, I would seize them at once, but we could also say, if you break any ceasefire in Ukraine, then we seize them. And we have offensive cyber capabilities with some very advanced countries with cyber espionage and cyber warfare capabilities. Though again, we worry now, how much do the Americans know about what we've got, and would they tip the Russians off, and so that these weapons wouldn't work? But this is a completely new era. We are back now to the pre-First World War era, where America sat glowering on the far side of the Atlantic, disliking European countries for their arrogance and imperial habits, not wanting to pick sides in continental disputes, and trying to pursue its own interests, mainly in the Western Hemisphere. And this is an era that nobody alive today remembers, and we have a very short amount of time to get used to it before it will be too late to do anything. So, I mean, I think there's still a chance that we can keep the United States at least neutral. And I think that the pressure from the markets, the bond markets, the stock markets, and from big American defense manufacturers will say, hey, you're trashing our export markets with your policy. Yes. So, I don't think that, as I said, the cake isn't baked yet. And we may, if we're lucky, we'll end up with a neutral America. And we will then find it easier to deal with our problems with Russia. But it's possible we get a hostile America. And that is, which is effectively treating us as a bargaining counter when I say us, I mean you, Ukraine, and us in Britain and everybody else. And we are something that they're going to give to Russia in the hope of getting Putin's support against China. And this is, if that happens, is going to make it even more difficult. But today is Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Lent, and I think we have 40 days for penitence about our past mistakes, resolve to start doing things that we haven't done, and to stop doing things that are bad for us. And I hope that by the time we get to Easter, we will Europe will be in a stronger state. But we are really, I think we have only weeks to get our act together. And I'm encouraged by the progress so far, but it is still not nearly enough.